So almost an entire year ago, I posted a video entitled YA Bandwagoning, in which I introduced a new series on my channel. In that series, I planned to make as I read style videos in which I read the first books in popular YA series that had been sitting around on my shelves for a long time, and talked about them as I read, giving thoughts and opinions. So I posted that video and then proceeded to never make a single video in that series until now. If you would like to see that video, YA Bandwagoning, I will link it up in the cards. But basically in that video, I think I introduced 5 first books in series that I would be planning on reading. One of those I am no longer planning on reading because I attempted to read it and didn't enjoy it and have since unhauled it. So the other ones are all ones that actually popped up on my TBR shelf unhaul series. So since I'm going to be needing to read those over the next couple months, I figured that I would work on this YA Bandwagoning series over these next couple months, and I'm starting with Daughter of Smoke and Bone. If you would like to see the other books that I'm going to be reading for the series, again, check the link up in the cards, because I really don't want to go into the same detail because I feel like I explained both why those specific books have been sitting on my shelves for a while and why in general I've kind of been putting off super popular YA series. So again, check the link up in the cards for that video. Highly recommended if you do intend to watch this video and any subsequent videos in the series. Also, I said this in the original YA Bandwagoning video, but I'll say it again for those of you who haven't seen that video. In this series, I'm only reading the first books in these series. Do not expect me to read this entire trilogy over the next couple weeks and to make videos on all of them. I'm just doing the first books because if I tried to do entire series, it'd be very overwhelming. So for this video, I'm gonna be reading Daughter of Smoke and Bone and giving my thoughts. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to be doing a discussion on my thoughts on Daughter of Smoke and Bone. That's definitely not going to be a solid review, but I do want to at least give my overall general opinions. I think that once I finish all the books for the YA Bandwagoning series, I will do a full review of all 4 or 5 of those, but not totally sure. Without any further ado, let's jump into my updates as I read Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So I am currently about 100 pages into Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and so far I'm enjoying it. I feel like at this point I should have more to say about the book because I am 100 pages into a 400-page book, but I feel like I don't have a ton to say about it so far. Because despite the fact that we are 100 pages into the story, not much has happened so far, and I'm not sure if I think that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because up until this point, until maybe the last 10 pages that I read, a lot of it was kind of not really background information, but a lot of information on Karu, our main character, and on her life so far, and on the errands that she has to run, and it just not very much happened until, like I said, these last 10 pages or so. And like I said, I'm not sure how I quite feel about that, because on the one hand, I enjoy slower paced things and I enjoy taking time in the world and with the characters and getting to know things. And on the other hand, I feel like something should have happened sooner. Or actually, to put that differently, I think I was just expecting something to happen sooner. So I'm not sure if it's even a quality judgment sort of thing rather than just my expectations were different than what I got. All in all though, I am not fully sucked in, I have to keep reading, but I am definitely intrigued. And I don't know how quickly I'm gonna finish this. I have a trip tomorrow and I'm not gonna be able to film updates as I go. So I'm not sure if I want to try and finish this whole thing today or what I want to do. I'm not sure, but I'll figure that out. I might read a little bit more a little bit later and we'll see. Hey, so it is several weeks later and I finally picked up the book again. I've been really bad about reading lately, but I have now gotten to page 202 of Daughter of Smoke and Bone. And I honestly can't remember what I said in the last update, so I'm just gonna give my overall thoughts. I could just rewatch the update, but I'll just give my thoughts. So at this point, I'm about halfway through the story, and I am very impressed with how unique it is. Like, there are a ton of YA stories that are fantasy or paranormal and have lots of different types of creatures, but the creatures in this are things that I don't see often, if at all. Maybe there are YA stories that deal with a lot of the, like, themes and creatures and, you know, air quote monsters that are dealt with in this story, but it's not something that I've personally seen before. So that aspect of it is very unique. The setting is very atmospheric, and it just deals with a lot of very unique ideas and characters and creatures, and it's just a very, very unique story. I'm definitely not one of those people who's like, all YA fantasy and all YA paranormal is the same, but like there are definitely certain commonalities between a lot of paranormal and fantasy stories, and there are a lot of tropes that you see throughout it, and I feel like a lot of that isn't in this book. I feel like this is just very separate from a lot of the YA that I've read. And now I'm lazy, so I'm just gonna let the book rest on me because I don't want to hold it up anymore. But that said, I am kind of, sort of, not totally invested in the story. Like, I like it and I'm interested in it, and I definitely am intrigued to read the rest of the book, and I plan to try to get through it in the next couple days. But I literally set this book down for like 3 full weeks without caring. This may be too soon to say this, but I feel like this is gonna be one of these books and series that I appreciate more than I actually enjoy it. Like, I can appreciate that this is a very unique story, at least from what I've seen, but I'm not sure that it's going to like be my all-time favorite story, if that makes sense. I also think, and I'm really not sure how accurate this really is, this is just me kind of spitballing, but I think that recently my reading tastes have started to change, and I've started to get to a point where I'm not quite as interested in YA fantasy stories or YA paranormal stories or whatever we're going to consider this, or just YA fantasy paranormal in general. I don't know why, and I'm not like trying to say that it's a bad genre, but I just lately have been falling out of interest and out of love with the genre. And so I'm wondering if maybe that is why I'm having these lukewarm to like mildly interested feelings toward a book that I think is really interesting and unique. That said, overall, I think I like Karu as a main character. She does have a few stereotypical YA female lead, like, little tropes to her that are a little bit annoying, but I think overall she's a very interesting main character, and I think I would say that I like her more than most YA female leads, if that makes sense. But then again, I would have to like actually think about other female YA leads and compare her to them, and it's escaping my mind right now. The 100 pages that I just read were pretty interesting and definitely pulled me back into the story, and I hope to read 100 pages tomorrow and 100 pages the next day so that I can finish it over the next couple days. But overall, those are my thoughts. I am interested, I'm intrigued, I think it's really unique, but I'm not totally in love. That said, I can totally understand why a lot of people do really love this series, because I can see how it's very separate and set apart from a lot of the YA that I've read before. So those are my current thoughts. I will update you next time I read, and then hopefully within the next couple days I'll be done and I'll be able to give my overall thoughts on the book. So it's the next night, and I was just gonna update when I finished the 100 pages that I planned to read tonight, but I got about like 15 pages into my section of reading for the day, and it got a little weird, which in itself might be weird to say because this entire book is pretty weird, but like this kind of insta-lovey plotline, subplot, just kind of appeared out of nowhere, and it's weird. I mean, to be honest, I can't say that I didn't expect it, but like the way it's coming about is just very weird and kind of uncomfortable for me. Like, I don't know, I don't like it. Like, I don't dislike either of the characters, and I don't necessarily even dislike the thought of them being together, but the way that this is all happening is kind of just weird for me. It just makes me kind of, I don't know, it gives me the creeps a little bit. Like, if you've read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's not quite like full-on insta-love, immediately fall in love at first sight, but it's kind of like one of those insta-lovey things where it's like, you can tell that it's there, but like the characters aren't necessarily blatantly acknowledging it. It's weird. I will continue reading and I'll get back with you at the end, hopefully in a little bit better spirits. So just finished reading for the night. I ended up going past where I meant to. I ended at about page 325-ish. And I honestly kind of want to finish reading the book tonight, but it's getting kind of late. I need to go to bed. I can finish it tomorrow. But things definitely got a lot more interesting. So like I said, I was going to stop around the 300-page mark, but like a certain event happens right at the 300-page mark, and I'm not even sure why I'm being vague, because people who are watching at this point have probably already read this book because I've probably spoiled something already. But an event happens right at the 300-page mark, and I didn't want to stop reading, and I kind of wanted to continue to like get past the point and like get all the way through that scene, but then it seemed like it was like spanning way longer than I thought it would, and I think it's gonna last like the rest of the book. So I'm stopping for the night. I think I have less than 100 pages left, if I am mathing correctly. I want to say that this book has like 400 pages. I don't know, 418. So I've got less than 100 pages left. So I can just finish this tomorrow night pretty easily, especially since I'm very intrigued to see what happens next. I will say that these pages I've read since my last update have kind of calmed my freaking out about the insta-love. It kind of, I don't want to say explained it, but like kind of made it less weird, and made me understand why it's a thing that's happening. But at the same time, like, I'm still kind of like, what is going on? And partially that's because I had to stop in the middle of this whole thing that's happening. But yeah, hopefully I finish the book tomorrow and everything makes a lot more sense, but I definitely feel like things started to make a lot more sense after my last update. Like the last 50 pages that I read started to like make things make a lot more sense. And now I just kind of have to figure out how things got to that point, which I believe is what's going to happen in the rest of the book. So I'm going to have to wait till tomorrow to figure that out. Like I said, I'm not even sure why I'm being so vague, because like I'm assuming that people watched to this point are people who have read the book. So basically, let's just put it out in the open. The 300-page mark is about where they break the wishbone. I was so curious about what's going to happen when this wishbone breaks that I didn't want to put the book down. And then the wishbone broke, and I assumed that like the next 10 to 15 pages would be like the aftermath of the wishbone breaking, but actually we're getting like Madrigal's whole backstory with the wishbone breaking, and it's like I flipped through the last 100 pages of the book just like really quickly to see what names popped up, and it seems like the majority of the rest of the book seems to be like Madrigal's story. So I like, at first I was like, oh, I'll just read the rest of Madrigal's story and then put the book down for the night. But like just flipping through, it seems like the rest of the book is like Madrigal's life. So I decided to set it down for the night. But I am really intrigued to pick this up tomorrow and try and figure out what all is going on, how Madrigal and Akiva got to the point that they were at, and like how Madrigal became Karu, and like all that chaos. So yeah, that's my little random spoilery section in a whole video that's not spoilery at all, I think, from what I can remember so far. But yeah, that's my thoughts for the night. Definitely a really unique story. Still definitely not anything I feel like I've read in YA before. The insta-love was like a problem for a little while, but now I understand it. So that's it for the night. I'm rambling. I should probably go to sleep. I will see you tomorrow. So it is the next night, and finally, more than 2.5 years after originally starting it, and more than 3 weeks after restarting it, I have finally completed Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. So before I get into my general thoughts on the book, I want to talk about those last like 100-ish pages that I read tonight. So the section that I read today was a really important backstory for the book in general, but like it was a full section. Like, it was such a flashback, like, backstory that it spanned, like, I would say that it was most of the section that I read tonight, which means that it was, like, 70-ish pages, which, like, isn't quite a quarter of the book, but it's a huge chunk of the book, was devoted to this backstory. So it felt, while important, it felt like I was reading a completely different story for a good chunk of tonight. And also, in addition to that, the backstory wasn't always told exactly in chronological order, which usually I kind of appreciate because I'm like, okay, piecing things together, trying to figure out how this story actually plays out. It makes me think a little bit more. It's really interesting. But when you combine a backstory that I'm trying to like find my place in, and the fact that it jumped around a little bit, I had trouble kind of finding my footing in this section, and it took me a while to fully figure out what all was going on. Like, in general, I kind of enjoy just things being thrown at me and having to try to figure out how they all fit together, but this was not the scenario for that, I think. Trying to figure out what is going on in this backstory, in this completely different plotline, storyline, a lot of new characters, it just was not the right time to be playing around with the timeline within that secondary timeline. It was confusing for a little bit, and while I definitely caught on to what was going on pretty quickly, I also had trouble finding my footing, like I explained. That said, I do feel like it added some much needed explanation to some of the stuff that I complained about earlier in the book, but like, I'm not sure that I'm still completely in love with it. And that brings me into my overall thoughts on the book. I would say that this is definitively a solid high 4 stars out of 5 for me. It's not quite up to a 5 out of 5, and I'll explain a little bit in a minute why, but it's definitely a 4 out of 5, and like I said, I think it's a high 4 out of 5, so probably like a 9 out of 10. It might be an 8.5, not sure. I literally just finished it. In either the last update or an update a couple nights ago, I said that I wasn't really sure how I felt about the book in terms of appreciation versus enjoyment. And while I still think that stands for at least some part, I do think that I began to enjoy the book more as I got closer to the end. And I think I also said this in another update as well, but I'm not sure if it's because I wasn't 100% totally in the mood to read this like right now, or if it's that I'm kind of starting to transition out of an enjoyment of this specific like paranormal fantasy YA novel. I'm not 100% sure. I'm at this like weird place in my reading taste where I'm not sure what I enjoy anymore. So I definitely would say that I enjoyed this book. I think that it was a really interesting and very unique read, but I would still say that my like of the book, which is it seems like it's such a weird term. My like of the book falls more on the appreciation side than the enjoyment side, despite the fact that I did enjoy the book. Because if I were going to be completely 100% objective, which for me isn't the point of doing reviews, but if I were to be totally objective or as objective as possible, I think I would be much closer to giving this 5 stars out of 5 than I am as a subjective reviewer. And that's because a lot of the things that I've already said before about this book, like I feel like this is a very unique book and a very unique story. I feel like the world is very interesting and very well fleshed out, and I think that there are a lot of elements of this book that make it a standout in the YA paranormal and fantasy genre. I won't harp on tropes too much because I think I talked about it in another update, but I just feel like this book executed a very interesting concept very well, and despite the fact that I'm not like totally in love with this book, I did really enjoy reading it, and I am definitely intrigued to see where the series goes from here. That said, I'm also not sitting here like I have to pick up the second book immediately, and I could because it's sitting on my bookshelf right out in the living room, so I could pick up the second book in literally 2 seconds if I wanted to, but I don't feel that sense of urgency, and I think that also stems from the enjoyment versus appreciation thing. Because after finishing this book, I'm very confident that I am going to read the rest of the series, because I feel like this was not a difficult read in the slightest. I feel like I kind of flew through this every time I picked it up. And so I feel like it'd be very easy to fly through the other 2 books. I just don't feel a sense of urgency, like I have to know what happens next. Maybe it's the ending, maybe it's my overall thoughts toward the story in general, but that is kind of just how I'm feeling right now. In terms of criticisms about the book, the only things that come to my mind just off the top of my head are, one, the thing that I talked about with the insta-love. Like I said, I feel like that was resolved in some ways. There were certain plot points and things that happened that I feel like fixed it a little bit, but it still felt kind of weird in the moment. And I still don't know how I feel about how that kind of happened initially. And then I guess the other thing that I would say is that I feel like the characters aren't the most interesting characters I've ever read. Like, I feel like I really like Karu as a character, and I feel like while she is kind of a like special snowflake type character, like her hair's blue and she's an art student, she's like hipstery, while she is kind of that, I do feel like she is interesting and I like her, and I feel like there's more to her than just that. Whereas I feel like some of the other characters' personalities are kind of basic, like not like they don't have personalities, they do all have distinct personalities, but I feel like they're also characters I've read before. And as I've said in a lot of videos recently, in a lot of discussion-y videos, I'm not sure whether that's just I've read too many stories and nothing's new to me, or if it's just boring characters. So I think that's where I'm going to leave this off, because this isn't supposed to be like an actual review, it's just supposed to be like a post-reading discussion and obviously my thoughts while reading the book. Like I said, I think that it's going to be about a 9 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10, 4 out of 5 definitely. And I am interested in continuing the series. I'm not going to immediately because I have other things that I need to get to, but I am definitely interested to see where this goes, even though I don't have that like sense of urgency. So that is it for this video. Let me know down in the comments if you have actually read this book and what you think of it. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.